So Simon, pleasure to have you here today. You've been you're the man, the myth, and the legend in my mind because I've heard your name so many times since I started recruiting in Tokyo in 2008. Know a lot of people in common, but have only recently had the chance to start getting to know you a little bit. So
That's
really
right.
looking forward to getting to know your perspectives even more today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're most welcome. My pleasure.
So a lot of people might know you as is it the C in CDS?
That's
But
right.
probably for those who don't know, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure, happy to do that. I guess my career journey is pretty atypical. I joined the Royal Hong Kong Police at the age of just turned 22 years of age. So I joined on a commission system, sort of fast track to inspector. I stayed 9 years, VIP protection, commercial crime bureau, detective, all that sort of stuff. Left. I think 1997 was it was on the horizon, so wanted to do something different. So I left the Hong Kong Police. Worked in a couple of trading companies. So these are export companies out of China that were selling things like knockdown self-assembly furniture, carpets, that sort of tableware, that sort of stuff, to importers in the UK and Europe. So I had a couple of fun years doing that. My wife's Japanese. I decided to do something different. I applied to do a law degree in the UK, came to Japan just to spend some time with her parents, my in-laws, learn the language a bit, go to law school. That all changed when I saw an advert from a very small company called Veritas International. It doesn't exist anymore. Um, in those days, I faxed through my resume. They were looking for recruiters. And I joined this small company on the princely sum of 250,000 yen a month. Just trial, see how it was going to go. Did pretty well in that. Met my business partner, Jason, another guy called Walter. And, after a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, we decided that we could do something a little bit different, probably better and with more scale on our own. So we left at various stages, started CDS, grew it to sort of Nanoku, Hachioku, that kind of level of business in the Japan market. All search, no contracting, very little volume recruitment. And we ended up selling it to Recruit Holdings, which was, I think, big news at the time. And we Recruit were already a $10 billion business, pre-IPO, never bought a recruitment company in their 50-year journey at that point. And were interested in us for I guess to help them get into Asia. I'd spent time in Hong Kong. My business partner Jason had done a executive MBA in Singapore, and also to help them get into higher levels of retained search and the connectivity we had at this sort of C-suite level with multinationals. So yeah, that took me back to Hong Kong. Multiple M&As across the region, a lot of post-merger integration, a year in India, and then ultimately 2020 left the Recruit Group formally, still have great friends there, and now have a business which does what it says on the tin. It's called Recruitment Transactions, and it's pretty much focused on M&A advisory work for the recruitment and staffing space at a global level. So we've already done several transactions and have a number in progress as we speak. So yeah, that's me in a not too short a nutshell.
Wow, thank you. So, what was it that prompted you to sell CDS to Recruit in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. We didn't build the business to sell actually. It was sort of a lifestyle business when we started, and we had a few people knock on our door. We received an offer from a recruitment group called Hudson, which we turned down. I think we just felt that probably the brand would disappear overnight. There'd be a lot of attrition of our people. While it might be financially quite good for my business partner and myself, probably wouldn't be great for the company. There'd be no legacy, no continuity.
Right.
And we had another private equity business approach us. We had a business called Live Door, run by quite a famous, infamous guy called Horie, approached us as well to sort of manage recruitment for their portfolio businesses. But ultimately, when Recruit knocked on our door, that was something different. I mean, I'd heard the Recruit story, but my wife and her family and my Japanese friends, they were very, very aware of Recruit and its presence, not just in recruiting, but in all aspects of sort of, life. I mean, so many different ways that they have to communicate with the public, magazines and online, offline, all sorts of interesting things about Recruit. Met this amazing guy called Murai-san and his team, and they made us an offer which was good financially, because the multiples, normally when you sell recruitment business, it's a multiple of the profit in the business, the EBIT that you have. The multiples were good in those days. It was just before Lehman shock. The markets were very frothy. So the money was good. But I think more importantly, Murai-san and his team carved out a vision for us to help Recruit as part of their journey to go public, help them to expand into Asia, to do more M&A, to grow organically, and to learn and grow with them. And they probably needed a business like ours with, I guess, leaders who were sensitized to the way business operates in Japan, speak the language to a certain extent, and have connections beyond Japan. I think probably needed us. So they paid a good premium. And I've spent, unusually for a founder exiting, I spent the best part of 10 years continuing to work for them as a founder, exiting his shares, as a management employee, and ultimately through my own company, serving them on a pretty much exclusive relationship for the majority of that time.
Very cool. So, of course, to found the company and develop it to the point of sale, you clearly must have been well acquainted with talking to decision makers and kind of selling yourself to get a commitment from them to retain you in many cases for whatever type of search. But now with Recruit and helping them expand in Asia, that is a very different type of, presenting yourself as having a vision for the business and getting people on board with that vision. So how did, selling yourself as a CEO, what did that mean to you at the time? And how did that change from, being a recruiter in Japan to then leading the Asia business?
It's a great question. I think, first of all, we needed to understand what we were selling, right? So, like the Recruit business is quite a complex business. It's a young business, and it's very dynamic. It's very entrepreneurial. And I needed to get myself into that mindset and understand that, I'm selling to a certain extent myself and my own career journey, but I needed to be able to represent the group properly and the people within it. Specifically, Murai-san, who is an amazing guy who went on to become chairman of the J League, who's one of these guys who showed intense interest in people and my family, and many different reasons that we could go into, if you like, why I thought he was a very strong leader. So when we went overseas, we originally were, there's a mix of organic growth. So we were starting offices in Hong Kong and Singapore. People had not heard of Recruit. They hadn't heard of CDS. They didn't know my background. But I think they were curious. I can't speak so much to Jason's background, but I guess it was similar. He'd done his executive MBA in Singapore. He's grown up partly in Asia. He had a story to tell. My one was obviously Hong Kong to Japan. All my life to that point, career-wise, had been in Asia. And so really just trying to attract people who would be part of this expansion for the Recruit group as we started to build this brand, which ultimately became known as RGF in the region. And I think that was okay, pretty easy for us to do. I mean, Jason went on specifically to build a business from sort of 0 to 100 in Singapore, which was very impressive. My own path was more on the M&A front. So I was very actively involved in meeting leaders of businesses that potentially Recruit could acquire, including a business called Korea International, which ultimately went public in the China market, and a business called Boley Associates, working with a lady called Louisa Wong, amazing lady who, grown up in the walled city in Hong Kong, went on to, from quite I would say probably a background that wouldn't lead to her going on and doing an executive MBA at Harvard, but she's sort of self-made woman, if you like, very impressive, letting her know about, myself, my background, and really giving her a degree of comfort that if she was to sell her baby, a business she'd been building for 20 years, that it was in good hands with us in the Recruit group. So I was doing a lot of facilitation. at the kind of C level with her and other leaders within her business and representing Recruit. And we had these town halls that we would have with our senior people, where they had a lot of questions about, are we all gonna have to learn Japanese? Are we going to be absorbed into the business? Are your comp systems going to apply here? Like many different things. So it had to, I guess, project some of the things that probably came out in your book, hopefully in your book, Ryan, a sort of a confidence and an authenticity, and maybe a little bit of vulnerability in terms of how I personally presented myself, and perhaps how I presented Recruit as well. Not all, bells and whistles, but things that you might want to think about too. So it wasn't a hard sell. It was more building trust, building relationships, and M&As take time, right? So that's what I sort of focused on for best part of 10 years. Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Mm.
Yeah. Confidence and authenticity, definitely core principles of the book. And I'm curious, having hired so many people, either as, leading a search for a client or attracting the right leaders into the business, getting the right people on board in Japan, across Asia, what is it that truly sets the best leaders apart from the rest?
I mean, as you ask that question, I'm thinking about specific leaders that I've worked with, right? And they're all different, but they have the best leaders, in my opinion, they have some common characteristics. I mean, probably the first is they're able to set a vision, right? And they're able to articulate that vision consistently, so you know where you stand. Then they're not drifting, and you're very clear on the direction they want to go and the direction they want the business to go. And so I like that in the leaders that I was working with. I think the second thing is maybe around authenticity and transparency. So I think that's really, really important to reach out to the hearts of people, and understand them at different levels within an organization. I think that's really, really important. So being able to communicate, if you're authentic, if you're transparent, you're going to be able to communicate, in my opinion, just more effectively, and you're going to be able to drive decision making and have people follow you. And in terms of having people follow you or work alongside you, maybe I should phrase it more correctly. I think the best leaders, they're just fantastic at attracting talent. They're talent magnets in a way. And when I think about that, I think of one specific guy who I see quite a lot in social media. His name is John. He's a candidate and also a client of mine for many years. He's an expat Canadian guy. If he hears this, he knows I'm talking about him. What I see is that he has really strong tribal loyalty from his people. Like, he's able to attract talent because he's so passionate about his business, about his mission. Like, you just feel the energy coming off him, and he's not political. So you just feel he's a genuine guy, and he makes time for people. And he's able to attract teams and build great teams. And interestingly for me, as busy as he is family wise and work wise, I noticed that he finds time to go back and connect with people he used to work with in the past. And he's not a one company man, different companies. And I think he's very authentic in terms of his thought leadership and his presence, So I think those are probably some of the key characteristics. I mean, there are others, but those ones really, really stick out for me. Yeah.
Interesting. I can totally imagine the aura he must have, and it reminds me of the simple act of doing reference checks in recruitment. And why is that important? Is because I heard from Nick Johnston this once, that A players know A players, so
Yeah.
they'll keep in touch with their former bosses. They'll keep a good relationship with them and be able to reach out to them and have them speak and attest to their achievements. So that's a great behavior for people to follow, to be genuinely interested in people and genuinely want to keep in touch with them?
Yeah, we used to have breakfast in the West in pretty much every quarter. That stopped recently with his a lot of his travels and everything. So we can't catch him more annually these days. But he's still the same John. He's still the same guy that I knew when I first introduced him to a technology client in the late 90s. He hasn't changed too much. Still has that fire in the belly.
Good, good. So zooming out a moment to look at, from the beginning until now, there's been major changes in the ways we work. COVID, for example, and just that paradigm shift from in office to work from home. But the question is, if you were to look back at how leadership has changed, or the desirable traits or the concept of good leadership and how that has changed over the past few decades, what comes to mind?
I explained earlier my background, in the Hong Kong police. So clearly, for me at least, it's a very 30 odd years ago. It was a very top down, directive sort of environment, and it has to be, situationally. That's just how it is in any discipline service. So I had a lot of exposure to that early on. But when I worked in Commercial Crime Bureau and when I worked in VIP Protection Unit as an inspector, as chief inspector, I, had a lot of contact with people on the outside, leaders on the outside, right? So I still would say that they were still quite, just a little bit top down in just how they dealt with the people around them, how they dealt with situations, and I think people expected them to make decisions and to be perfect and to always get things right, and to exude a sort of a confidence and follow my leader type of veneer or whatever. So I think that has changed somewhat. I think these days leaders, they just have to be more inclusive. They have to be more collaborative. They have to be more transparent. They have to be even more authentic. They have to be able to answer questions on a wide variety of topics which might be uncomfortable for them. It could be DEI, it could be LGBTQ, it could be religious topics, it could be global political topics. And there's so much going on in the world right now, right? So they have exposure to that. They need to be able to deal with that. They just can't pass that on to the minions, And I think they need, leaders today, they need to be able to communicate with just more stakeholders. And I think, well, I know in the past, it was just more, you send an email, you make a phone call, you have a town hall, you send out a newsletter. There wasn't social media, right? So, you weren't judged in the public domain. There was no LinkedIn, there was no Twitter, X, there's no Instagram, TikTok, ways that you can amplify your image and ways you can get tripped up too. So I think that, modern day leaders, they have to be more savvy and understand that there are multi-channels, not just one channel to communicate with their own people, but the greater markets. They need to be able to master all of these channels effectively. I think that would be another big difference. There's others, but those are the ones that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, and that can be intimidating, right? And really requires that authenticity piece because, as you say, the media channels can amplify you and whatever it is that you're projecting, and people can tell if that's not authentic. So for me, what that's meant is getting clear on that vision, and then naturally it feels exciting and feels right and true, like I'm on the right path.
Yeah, and it's not always easy to master because I think sometimes I'll give you an example. A leader that I worked with in the past, technology head, I noticed that this guy put out quite a lot of stuff on Facebook about he's clearly an atheist, right? So there's a lot of like God jokes or religious jokes or whatever that was going out on Facebook. And I met him once at some event in the region, and I said to him, how many people do you have on your technology team right now? And he said, around 30. So that's a good number. I said, how many of them are atheists? And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said to him, look, I'm not pushing the religious angle at all. I'm not particularly that way myself. It's just, you'll have people on your team who probably are Christians and Buddhists and, Muslim or whatever. And and they're working for you, and they're seeing you in cyberspace saying all of that stuff, and maybe they feel a bit uncomfortable about that. And he said, I never realized. I was just talking to 5 or 6 of my friends. I'm like, look, you've got 500 odd Facebook connections. I'm sure several of your team are on it. Goes, yeah, they're nearly all on it. I'm like, well, just this is the sort of thing, right, that we leaders in the past wouldn't have had to really worry too much about. It's kept behind closed doors, and comments are more siloed, and they're cut off at the pass. These days, you can easily get tripped out with leaders can easily get tripped out because they have to communicate so many different ways, online and offline, with so many different stakeholders, and there's so many different ways to spread messaging, good but certainly negative, as we know, right? So yeah, just something to be careful about.
Yeah, different platforms, different mindsets, different messages that are appropriate for those mindsets. Um, so what's one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's watching this right now who aspires to be a CEO or in the C-suite? What would be one piece of advice you have for them?
Can I give more than one?
Yes, absolutely.
I think first, and goes to what I was saying earlier in terms of the sort of leaders that I admire. I would work really hard on building trust, and I think trust comes through credibility and consistency. So working on your personal brand, how you communicate your brand, how you communicate your business in a consistent and credible manner. I think that leads to trust, and trust is the true currency of leadership, right? So you need to have that. So I think that's pretty mainstay. And with that comes authenticity and transparency, some of the things I was talking about. I think also I would advise them to get a good mentor, someone who can provide them with some guidance, and someone who's a positive influence, like not a energy sucker. And I use that term deliberately because you may have friends and family who are around you who kind of drain your energy, but when you're going through this kind of leadership journey, you have enough to deal with on the leadership front, and your professional life and your home life. You have to surround yourself with positive people. And I'll give you an example in my current life. I mean, I'm at the tail end of my sort of leadership journey from an age perspective in perhaps in many ways, but I run, every week with a guy called Ben and a guy called Barry. One of them, they're younger than me, couple of decades younger, decade and a half maybe. And they're just really positive people, right? So we get up early, we get out 6 o'clock, we run locally, run hard, and we chat, and we keep it really upbeat, right? And we don't get into religion, we don't get into politics, we don't get into each other's personal lives too much. It's talk football, there's banter, we talk about just things that are happening in Japan, travel tips and holidays, and that sort of stuff. Like, it's very positive and uplifting, not just the run, but just being with them. And they're young leaders to me, right? Because they come from a different generation. So it's good for me to see how they feel about the world, right? So in my case, I don't need to go and find an 80-year-old to kind of learn from. I would rather, be with people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who think about the world differently, maybe in some senses, similarly in others, but people are really positive and uplifting. So I think for these aspiring people, I would, aspiring CEOs, people on that journey, that leadership journey, it's so important to ground yourself with the right people, professionally and personally. It will help you immensely to get where you
are. Oh, it's such good advice. They say that if you hang around 5 millionaires, you'll be the 6th. And that can apply to any sort of community or behavior that you're looking to emulate, whether it's, gym or whatever. So yeah, being very intentional about who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a mentor or a peer or a coach in different capacities. So Simon, I understand you have managed to read the book, Sell Yourself Like a CEO.
I did. And I have to say, before you ask any questions about that, I was pleasantly surprised, like, because, as you said, we have not had too many opportunities to interact, and I found it fascinating because I'm a curious guy. So, curiosity to me is a strong leadership, must have, to be honest. And I like learning about your background and your own kind of leadership journey, and the fact you lived in the UK, and your time overseas, your time in Japan, and your early kind of entrepreneurial stuff. Like, it gave me a sense, even though I didn't know you that well at that point, of who you are. And I think it goes to building that kind of credibility. So I think it started off in a good way, and I was keen to kind of see what you had to say after that.
Yeah, thanks. What did you like most about the book, Sell Yourself Like a CEO?
These days when we're talking about books, for me it's like all audible, right? So I find that I learn better when I hear rather than read. I have to be honest with you and the audience. So if I go for a run or a long bike ride or something like that, I listen to a podcast. Diary of a CEO is one of my favorites these days. Yeah. Listen to a podcast. I can almost recite it verbatim when I get back. Like, so much goes in. If I read a book, I get distracted. I don't know why. What I liked about your book, coming to the point, is quite punchy, right? There's like, the core content is about 80 pages, right? Like, there's other stuff, but like the core content's about 80 pages. So you read it on a plane, right? Or you read it in an afternoon, so you can get through it. And that for me at least is something like, because there's so many books on leadership, and they're just like big in-depth studies, but I found it really refreshing to go through that. And then you have a lot of really nice ancillary, added bonus material, I think you call it, at the end. About 50 pages of that, right? Which is a significant chunk of the book. But that's not just you giving us a bibliography, right? Books you've read or books we should read or whatever. That's a lot of that is practical advice, right? So those were the things that I really enjoyed, and I think it just made me think a little. There's some messaging in it as well, right? So there's like, I like the just the emphasis on listening. I think it's just a really important skill, rather than being listened to, right? So I think it's just a lot of good points that came out. How you build your how you build your career as a business and everything that's attached to that, right? Really enjoyed kind of diving into that, and I think you were pretty authentic too, because the stories that you used. You had real life examples in many cases of senior level people that you'd work with, and particular leadership challenges that they were overcoming. And because for me, it was often in a recruitment context, it was, a career progression context or a career move context. It was kind of easier for me to get my head around what was happening there. And I found that quite relatable in a number of cases.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm sure most of this content is second nature to you, being a seasoned C-suite leader yourself. But were there any parts that made you reflect on your own leadership journey?
There were. To be honest, there were. I think the main one was that I get two things. First of all, I think I focus on. People in recruitment, they focus a lot on helping other people, right? To get over the line, right? To you're coaching them through the interview process, and you're working with clients, and you're exerting influence and energy on other people. But we don't do enough on ourselves, right? Me included. Like, I think my leadership journey was very intuitive. I didn't. I observed people, but I didn't really invest too much in like building too much of a personal brand or learning too much about leadership. Actually, until I had sold CDS to Recruit, and I went out into the region. And one of the things that the companies that we were acquiring and the people within them were asking for is they wanted L&D training, they wanted learning and development, they wanted leadership courses, they wanted executive search courses. And so I then felt that I needed to up my game in order to be able to bring in some new ideas and new methodologies. And Recruit were kind enough to send me to Oxford University on a residential leadership course, and to Cornell University again on a residential course, which was high leadership, thought leadership, executive search. And then I paid for myself for program in Hong Kong and so forth. So I think I wish I'd done that earlier on in my career. Jason did an executive MBA, my business partner, and I think that helped him immensely. But I didn't really invest in myself enough. I think the other thing is it made me realize that I would have benefited through having a mentor earlier on. And I say that because, like in those days, starting recruitment businesses, building recruitment businesses, exiting recruitment businesses, there weren't that many people around who actually you could talk to, because it was the whole executive search landscape was smaller, right? It was more nascent, and people just weren't offering those services, and there was just very little in the way of online stuff that I could avail myself of. But I would have benefited enormously if I could have had, someone like Nick Johnson, who's, let's say he was 10, 20 years older than me and exited his business. Bernie Shimu did the same with Hayes and Vincherry. To really sit down and talk to and understand like how I could build a better business with CDS. Because I think Jason and I, we tripped over each other a lot. Like we both felt we could do marketing and HR and talent attraction and leadership and closing deals and winning retainers and selling the company and stakeholder management, all these different things. And I think if we'd have availed ourselves of, if we look more closely at our own leadership journeys, we probably would have been able to figure out, okay, you do this really well. I do it okay, but you do it better than me, Jason. So why don't you just focus on that? And if you're cool with that, and what do you think I do that you feel I should concentrate on? Like, we should have had that discussion. I think we would have been able to sector up responsibilities, and that would have probably led to an even better exit, to be honest, and a bigger business, a more scalable, more profitable business. So it made me kind of reflect on my own leadership journey in terms of not working enough on my own development and my own brand in the early days, understanding leadership outside of the leaders that I were working with in Japan, the global ideas on this, and really getting on board a proper mentor, someone who could help guide and steer me and make the business more successful. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? What can happen when we intentionally pause, take a step back and think, okay, what am I really good at? Where am I adding the most value? What do I not like doing? And who around me maybe will enjoy doing that and do that better than me? Finding a way to, through that self-awareness, accepting one's weaknesses and acknowledging the strengths of others, and finding a way to, make 1 and 1 equal 3, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Is there anything from the book that made you stop and think, man, more people need to hear this?
I think that there's a number of things, and maybe I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I just like the fact that it was clear, concise advice about how to, build your career as a business, that kind of leadership journey, and the focus on just in your career, setting a vision, surrounding yourself with the right type of stakeholders, enablers, mentors, thinking about where you want to get to in 3 years and 5 years, and the tools that you need to help you get there. I think that was really important to me. And I think we drift, a lot of people, we drift along on this leadership journey, and it's not intentional. You can get promoted because someone resigns, right? Or the boss likes you because you support the same football team or something like that, right? And you just end up in a leadership position, but it's not intentional. You haven't worked. I mean, it's maybe fortuitous, but you haven't really worked towards that. So I think it's helpful for people to, whether they're 35 or 45 or 55 or whatever, to really think about where they want to be in the next 3-5 years. Like, what does good look like for them? Because there's a lot of useful tools in the book, self-analysis tools, leadership tools that will help them think and plan and plot that kind of progress more methodically and more intentionally, rather than just kind of drift along. So I like the focus on that side of things.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I hope people will get out of the book as well, is just the habit of being intentional, scheduling those times to self-reflect and review. And the reason the workbooks are in there is so that it's not just intake, but output, being able to walk away from having read the book with something tangible to say, and the confidence inventory, for example, to give people talking points to share on the fly. Simon, so many different types of people: recruiters, salespeople, corporate executives, clients, candidates, etc. Who would you recommend this book to?
Well, obviously recruiters, obviously within the industry that we've operated in for so many years, recruiters, aspiring recruiter leaders, current recruitment leaders. I think it's helpful to avoid the same sort of sameness that we see on LinkedIn. There's too much kind of homogeneity in the way that people project and speak. I think it will help build authenticity. I think it will help build credibility and purpose. I think so that it's useful for them to think and reflect on that. I think secondly, for anyone really who is intent on career progression, because there's a lot of techniques and examples in there on how during that leadership journey, whether it's negotiating an offer, whether it's career transition, the onboarding process, building a business plan, dealing with a counter offer. Like, there's a lot of useful tools in there that I think people, they come at you when you make that journey. When you change jobs, they come at you. Not everyone has a recruiter like yourself on their side, right? So they may just get introduced to a role and they don't know how to negotiate their offer themselves. They don't really know how to deal with a counter offer in their current company. They probably can't really think about what onboarding should really look like and how to plan for that kind of like 30, 60, 90-day journey. I think there's a lot in there which is, maybe it's self-evident, but it's neatly packaged and available for anyone who is intent on career progression.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. What triggered writing the book was taking everything that I teach to candidates in little bits and pieces throughout a transition or throughout the course of a relationship. But then when I realized that, hey, these principles apply to anyone, anywhere. Like, I think I was watching someone on TV being interviewed at McDonald's, and the question they were asked is, tell me about a challenge you've had recently. How did you overcome it? What was the result? We can expect that same question even in a C-suite interview. So when we look beyond the title, but we look at the principles, we can, I hope that this is me packaging along everything I've learned from executives in a way that can help anyone anywhere, but an unexpected benefit as well as for recruiters. Because if we think about, candidates we put into interview process and looking at first interview to placement ratio, that ratio will be higher if we prep candidates and they show up with just a little bit of forethought and preparation and rehearsing 1 or 2 STAR method stories. So I hope this can help recruiters out there.
Yeah, and I think that comes across very clearly in your book, because the examples that you use, the real life examples, you touch on those points, right? And where you can come unstuck in your career progression and interview process and so forth. So I think, yeah, it has general application, but for the recruitment sector, it's particularly relevant.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Simon. Is there anything else you'd like to add today?
I know. I think that's good. Are you going to write another book, or are we seeing? Is this your one-shot wonder, or what's coming next?
Who knows? Maybe there will be a sequel for employers called "Sell Yourself" or "Sell Your Company Like a CEO," but we'll see what happens.
Well, I would be, given my work in M&A, I would be interested in collaborating on that one. So
Oh,
that's
cool.
that's, that's what
Well,
I'm doing, right?
yes, you would be the man to talk to. So let's continue that conversation.
Wonderful.
But thank you so much for today, Simon, and really appreciate your time and your perspective to really enrich the community. And for anyone who is interested in the book, you know where to buy it. It's on Amazon and 13 markets. Just type in "Sell Yourself Like a CEO," and it's available in all formats except audiobook. So Simon, you might have just triggered me to start the audiobook creation
I
process
hope
here,
so.
which
I hope
is
so. You can do it yourself, right?
yeah, with Mike and with Audacity, the free app, and in fact, it's very easy for anyone to publish a book as well. This book is all print on demand on Amazon. So for anyone who's thinking about getting their own idea out there, it's very easy to do. You can start with even a digital file, just uploading it to Amazon KDP. I have no incentive to promote Amazon KDP at all, but I am very much incentivized to see people's authentic knowledge and desires and personality come out to help more people in whatever way that is.
Brilliant. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Ryan. We'll catch up.
Thank you, Simon. Much appreciated.